Hi, I'm Albert Yip. This is the first presentation of the course I do at UVA Box Hill and UVA Nunawading here in Victoria, Australia. So I have been doing this course for the last 2 years, and sorry, I lost my hard drive, and therefore I won't be able to upload the 2017 series for the China Today. I'm hoping to do it for this 2018. So I will be trying to upload one presentation every week, except during school holidays where the course doesn't run. Now, U3A Box Hill or U3A Nona Wedding operates under the brand name U3A. U3A stands for University of Third Age. Although it is run like a university, but we do not give qualifications. There's no credit. So we don't, any person taking the course doesn't need any minimum qualifications. As long as they enjoy the course, they can take it. At the same token, those who is teaching the course also do not have any special qualifications. The same here for me. I think the only qualification I have is I'm able to read and write Chinese. So that might be my only qualifications. Anyway, today's topic is about poverty in China. So today I'm going to show you three videos, and then during the class we have some discussions. But since this is not recorded during the class, so I will have to fill in all the discussions throughout this particular presentation. Okay, let's go to the definition of poverty first. This is the UN definition in 1985. Absolute poverty is defined as a condition characterized by severe deprivation of basic human needs. Basic human needs, of course, include food, safe drinking water, sanitary facilities, health, shelter, education, and information. Obviously, this depends a lot on income. So if you are poor, you definitely might have less access to it. So that is the definition of poverty. Now, some of these characteristics or needs is commercial. For example, here in Australia, internet is a business operation, so we have to pay for it. So poor people probably might not be able to afford very high speed internet. Overall poverty takes various forms, basically lack of income and productive resources to ensure sustainable livelihoods. That means you have to live day by day depending on the paychecks. In that situation, a lot of time there will be hunger and malnutrition. In the Western world, I noticed that it is cheap to get calories. Soft drinks sometimes cheaper than bottled water, and but nutrition is very expensive. Some of the fresh produce, etc., cost more than having a burger from one of those big chain burger restaurants. So malnutrition is an important problem, and so are the ill health, both mentally or physically, limited or lack of access to education and other basic services, including getting sick very easily and very easy to die because of some form of illness, homelessness, inadequate housing, unsafe environment, sometimes complicated by also social discrimination and exclusion. It is characterized by the lack of participation in decision making and in civil, cultural, and social life. Um, this particular sentence, I think, is very Western. We see that in some countries where, like here, we have voting. So we supposedly we participate in decision making. At least we participate in selecting our leaders, but it still happen that there is poverty in every country. So that is a very well, it's here as a definition, but I don't probably agree with it. It occurs in all countries as a mass poverty in many developed countries, pocket poverty amid wealth in developed countries. Um, Loss of livelihood as a result of economic recession, sudden poverty as a result of disaster or conflict, and sometimes even illness. Sometimes, for example, in United States, if you get ill, you may get bankrupt. The poverty of low-wage workers. Some of the workers are working in again those burger shops. Even both husband and wife work, they are not able to provide for their children as well. So that is poverty and utter destitution of people who fall outside family support systems, social institutes, and safety nets. So this is the official definition. So what we want to look at is obviously China. So China, depending on how you count, has become the world's largest economy. While doing that, again, depending on how you count, some people say 500 million, some say 700 million. But anyway, there's a lot of poor people being lifted out of poverty. What is remaining in 2018 is about 40 million people. Now, the poverty definition in China is pretty low. It's defined as a household with income per capita less than $90 US. So if a family of four, for example, have less than $8 a day to spend on everything, then it is considered poor. So even if these people are being lifted out of poverty, they are not rich, they are still very, very poor. So, but the Chinese government has made a commitment to eliminate poverty by 2020. So this is 2018, 2 more years to go. See how they can lift another 40 million people out of poverty. This is one of the issues we are looking at the moment. So first of all, I will show you a video. This video comes from TED, and after that we will discuss a little bit about the video, and then we will show you another two. So take a look.
Thank you for having me. Yes, rethinking China. We're considering it in respects of poverty. But perhaps my topic should also be rethinking the world in respects to poverty. I'm going to start by giving you a small anecdote about my arrival in China. I arrived in China in 2006, late January. It was a rainy evening. I landed in Pudong Airport. And I never forget this. This is one of the most pressing things that have stayed on my mind. I got in the taxi, and what followed was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. I swear to God, I sat in the car, braced at the back, thinking I'm going to die. I thought this guy was going to crash into everything. It was raining. I thought the car was going to slide everywhere. I was terrified. The good news is I got to the hotel okay. We didn't crash. 8 years on, I've been wondering to myself, you know, why do I see so few accidents? High-speed accidents. I see lots of fender benders. I see loads of accidents in Shanghai. I mean, we've all experienced the roads in China. You wonder, like, why, you know, why? I travel on the highways all the time to Moganshan, and I see accidents, but, you know, they're not as regular as I would see them in South Africa. So it got me thinking, I want to look at the stats a bit. So I looked at the stats, and I compared 3 different states, or provinces, you might call them. I compared Gauteng, which is the most wealthy area of South Africa, and California and Shanghai. And I looked at how many people die per 100,000 people. And I was shocked. You can see the numbers above you. Only 4 in Shanghai. And that just can't be true. It just can't be. I mean, you walk onto the street, you think you're going to die. But it's a perception. It's something that's, and the reason I'm bringing this to your attention is that it's so easy to look at something through a Western set of eyes and think that something just can't work, but the outcome can be quite different. So I'm going to tie that in today a little bit with poverty. Now, the World Bank defines poverty as follows. Poverty is hunger. Poverty is the lack of shelter. Poverty is being sick and not being able to see a doctor. Poverty is not being able to go to school, not knowing how to read, not knowing how to speak properly. Poverty is not having a job. Fear of the future, living one day at a time. Poverty is losing a child to illness because of unclean water. Poverty is powerlessness, a lack of representation, and freedom. It's a serious topic. It's something that is very close to me because I come from South Africa. And we have serious poverty problems. But this is not a South African or African problem. This problem is experienced all over the world. So, I compared these three places again. Gauteng, California, Shanghai. Now, when we take the definition of the World Bank, one of the points is without shelter, without a home. So I wanted to just cross-reference. What's the difference? Well, I know in South Africa, poverty is bad, and I know lots of people don't have homes. And we have what we call shanty towns or slums, or a nice way of putting them is illegal settlements. So in South Africa, we see that 23% of the people in the richest part of South Africa don't have a home. California, surprisingly, 20%. I mean, we were just looking at the Hollywood pictures in the previous talk. A lot of those people live in shelters, state-funded places where people can live, freebies that people give them to live that way. And then you look at Shanghai. It's difficult to get the exact numbers. Let me reference that first. It wasn't easy. But from personal experience, I've traveled all over China. My business is in rural China. And we're building more resorts around China. And I go and experience third, fourth, fifth tier cities. I'm yet to see a single shanty town. Where the hell are the poor people living? Why don't they have home? Well, there must be people lying on the street somewhere. Yes, I see a few in Shanghai, here and there. But nothing like I saw when I lived in Manchester or when I lived in Cape Town. So I started to think, hang on a second. Are my perceptions, are my Western glasses that I have skewing my understanding? When I first came to China, I thought, well, look, China's a developing nation. Just 30 years ago, this was a starving nation. Surely, this nation must suffer equally or even more greatly than the Western and developed world. But somehow, these numbers don't add up for me. All right? But they're true. I see it with my own eyes. Now, poverty directly relates to crime through drugs. This is a proven fact of many, many articles, and you can read it all over the world. And we can all say that living in Shanghai must be one of the safest places anywhere in the world. Oh, okay, my reference point is not so safe. So South Africa is not the safest place in the world. So I can say there's few people out there who would question that statement. But poverty, drugs, crime, they all relate it. So I have to ask myself, like, why is this? So I'm going to go back 8 years. In 2005, I did an MBA. And our school requires us to do a research report. And at that same time, I read a book by C.K. Prahlad called The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. Now, being an insufferable entrepreneur looking to make a buck anywhere I can, I figured, well, there must be like a business opportunity to sell to the poor. I mean, that'll be brilliant in Africa. I'll be a billionaire in no time. So I was quite fascinated about it. And so the premise of his book, he seeks that in order to alleviate poverty, you have to find a way to integrate the people, the poor people, into the economy, make it an inclusive economy. He goes further to say that if you don't, the poor are forced to pay a penalty for being poor. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to show you some of the outcomes of my empirical research to try and prove his point to be correct in South Africa. This research has been published, so it's a proven empirical, well, whatever they say in academic talk. So the first thing we look at, quite simply, we take a basket of goods. In South Africa, it might not have been rice and soya sauce. We used, potatoes and cigarettes and oil, and so the basic stuff that people in South Africa would need to live. We take that basket of goods and we price it in the poor areas and we price it in the middle income areas. And what we find is something quite remarkable. Or maybe it's not so remarkable for you, but the poor are paying 16% more than the middle income. So how the hell are you supposed to get out of being poor if you're paying more than the guy above you? And why is that? You all might be asking why? Well, simply, it's actually two very simple reasons. One is the poor guy, he might not have a car, or he can't afford to drive 4 kilometers to the discount supermarket store, so he's forced to go and buy at the local shop. He can't afford to buy a 10-kilogram bag of sugar, which you would buy. He has to go and buy a little sachet this big, which is more expensive because it's packaged in some funky little packaging. So everything in the system, the economy, the way the system works in the West and South Africa forces this penalty on poor people. Telephones, 43% more. I mean, here's a dude who's got a small, he's got his iPhone, he's got to prepay his phone. I got credit, I can get a contract. I pay 43% less than him. It's ridiculous. Electricity, okay, now I must say this stat is rather unique to South Africa, but poor people, because they don't have credit, have to pre-buy their credit at certain places which aren't available everywhere, and you have to travel vast distances to get it and end up paying 60% more for electricity. There are dozens more in the research. I just pulled out 3 for your examples. Now, this problem is not a South African problem. Please don't think this is only in South Africa. There are dozens and dozens of research reports that show this problem to be all over the Western world, in America, in Europe, everywhere. So I left it. That was the end of my research. I thought, well, that was done. I passed my MBA. Great. And I came to China a year later. And in the 8 years I've been in China, I realized that everything I wrote in my book was false here. It doesn't apply to China. Somehow China's different from the rest of the world. The food. Now, qualified. This is not empirical research. This is my IE and me research. So IE goes down to the food market, and I get her to get me a whole lot of prices. I said, look, what are the basic things we need to live here? Okay, rice and oil and soya sauce and basic things. And I say, okay, you go down to this place and this place and this thing, go get the prices. All right, that's my research. It's not empirical, but it's a good enough analogy for today's talk. 2% less for the basic food goods. I mean, that's an 18% difference from the South African place. Okay, telephones is about a wash, all right? In some parts of Zhejiang where we work, the prices are cheaper for the poor. Here in Shanghai, there is a bit of a decrease. If you have a contract, you can get a better deal if you buy bulk, and it's quite complicated. We'll call it a wash. Electricity, wow. Barack Obama would love this system. In China, I don't know if you guys know this, maybe some of you don't, but in Shanghai, if you have a small house and a 1-bedroom, and you use only so many watts of power, you pay less. From the guy who has a bigger house, the unit price increases the more you consume. It's a perfect weighted scale. So the poor guy's paying a little bit, and the rich guy's paying a lot. Barack Obama would love it. Brilliant system. I mean, here you see something completely weird. How the West, where we live, we spend our lives trying to give to the poor to keep them alive. Here in China, I don't see many poor, but they seem to be doing just fine. And I promise you, the government's not giving to them freely. This interesting little statistic actually caught my attention. I was with Rupert recently, and he said to me, 97% of the people of the top 1,000 billionaires in China are first-generation wealth. To me, that's a direct correlation to this and the fact that anyone has an opportunity to succeed in China. No other place in the world is this the fact. The rest of the world, old money has a big part to play in the development of billionaires and successful people. But in China, it's fair game. Anyone can succeed, no matter how poor you are. So I've got to tie this in and try and explain to you how China does it. How do they manage to get the prices less? Why don't we do the same in the West? Well, it's much more complicated than that. It's a way in which you make an economy inclusive. Now, there are lots of research reports on this too, and some books recently that I've been reading, but very few of them speak about how China does it. So that's what I'm speaking about today. China includes everyone in the economy. It becomes an inclusive economy. I'm sure some of you are wondering, what does inclusive economy mean? I must be honest with you, I never like these big fancy words, but I'll give you a simple anecdote to what it means. All right, tomorrow, Julie, I can take you out for lunch, and we can go and eat at our local little place near our office, and we can pay 5 RMB for lunch. But then I might go and take Andres, you, for lunch tomorrow at the Bund, and we'll have 250 RMB at the Bund each, so 500 RMB. And what does that mean? It means that anybody has the opportunity, no matter where you are on the social rung, you can transact with what you can afford. There's no other city in the world that you can spend 5 RMB to get lunch. I promise you can't do it in London or New York, not in downtown, all right? That's what it means to be an inclusive economy, where you give everyone a chance to be a part of the economy, make them feel that they are part of civilization, of society. And once you do that, you start to change the dynamics of the poor. And that's how only 2% of the population in Shanghai are living homelessness. So I'm going to conclude, and I'm going to leave you with 2 points. The first point is, to change a nation, to change poverty, perhaps it's about time we stop looking at our ideas of what's right and wrong and look to China for solutions. Let's stop rethinking China, let's rethink the world. Poverty is one of the greatest problems facing the world. And it's growing in every nation around the world, bar here. For whatever reason, this country, it's not growing. But 20% of the people in California live without a home. First point. Second point, take your Western glasses, the glasses that you've arrived in China with, and throw them away. Looking at China through the eyes and the perceptions that we've grown up with will not work, just like my car story. But please, all of you, don't go down Yan'anlu, stop your car on the highway, and reverse if you miss the exit. I honestly can't say you'll stay alive. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have a look at the first video. So let me, before I play this video, let's talk a little bit about what is discussed in the video. First of all, it is observed that China is quite different from the rest of the world. Almost everywhere, poverty is increasing, except China. And the government is wanting to eliminate poverty. Well, no matter what's the definition, at least they try to do it. So that's one interesting observation. The second interesting observation is the kind of poverty in China is different from the kind of poverty in the rest of the world. For example, homelessness is not an issue in China. This can be explained quite easily. China is not an immigration country. People have been living on this land over thousands of years. That means no matter how poor they are, they were once living, at least their parents or ancestors were living on the land. And therefore, they must have some kind of a shelter, family shelter passed down from generations. So homelessness is not an important issue. Yes, from the point of a city, they do migrate there. Actually, Chinese government call them migration anyway. So people moving from rural areas to the city, they are considered migrants. At the very beginning, China limits the migrants because if you allow everybody to move to China in an instant, the city system won't be able to support. So, but eventually nowadays, basically anybody can get onto a bus or a train. You have money, you can get on a high speed rail and then travel from one place to other place. So the Chinese homeless problem isn't as severe. As shown in the video, about 1% or 2% people in Shanghai are homeless compared to say California or the South Africa, about 20 something percent. So that is a first interesting observation. The other observation the speaker had identified is the so-called inclusiveness, the inclusive economy. So I want to also talk about it a little bit. Among the world's two most populous countries, it is India and China. In 1970s, actually the Indian per capita income is slightly higher than China. But over the last 30 to 40 years, China has now become the world's largest economy, people getting rich much higher. The per capita income between China and India is growing. Chinese is about 5 times more have more wealth on average per capita than India. Why? Well, Chinese adopted the inclusive economy strategy. So what they do is open up manufacturing. We know that China is the factory of the world, so everybody put their factories in China. So these factories started in the coast. So in the coast cities, they started factories. The poor farmers from the rural area travel to the cities and then work there as a factory workers. They work 10, 12 hours per day, work for a couple of years, and then return to their village, a middle class. Theoretically, everybody is able to participate in this particular manufacturing economy. It is hard work, it is difficult, so it has a lot of commitment from the families, but at least you can do it. But the case for India is different. They take a different path. They focus on, for example, in IT developments. Now, IT, that means you at least will have some kind of education before you can do any IT work. You must be able to speak English at the minimum. That means the economy of the India is exclusive. Only those with education, only those who can speak English can participate in this IT technology or IT field. So this is I personally I think unless India can change into a more inclusive economy, it will remain at the current state until they can change. But anyway, for China, it is inclusive. Everybody can participate. As shown in the video again, out of the top 1,000 billionaires in China, 97% of them are first generation. That means those who have money, well, because China was started poor, so there's nobody has any money. So everybody start from the same place. So equal opportunity. So that is one of the key points to understand about China. Now, China has lived out, depending on how you count again, 500 million to 700 million people out of poverty. The remaining why they remain poor is a very difficult situation. For example, the village they live in might be isolated. The people there might be old and they might not be able to travel outside, and maybe the education system there is no good. There's a whole lump of different problems, and the Chinese government called that this is the hardest part of the community which can lift out of poverty. So let's see this video from Xinhua's special and see how she describes the situation and the last 40 million people out of poverty.
Hi. When I was told I was going to Chongqing, I thought, hot pot, karaoke, but here I am, a 6-hour drive from the city, and a fair trek up that mountain in the village of Changfeng. And I've been told that today, farm work's on the agenda. The young couple in the family have recently moved back from Guangzhou to raise their family, and as a sideline to earn some money, they're actually raising honeybees. And look. This farm is 1,000 metres above sea level, and this plot of land is perched on the side of a mountain. And although they've been offered homes down in the town, the older generation are really reluctant to give up their farmland. Hello? So it's hard to grow rice on the slopes of these mountains, and I've been told that the staple here, rather than rice, is potatoes or corn, or sweet potatoes. The smoked pork and sausage in this area takes about 12 months to dry, and not only is it a staple across all of the tables here, it's also quite a lucrative product at markets around Chinese New Year. And the way it's done has actually been listed as an intangible cultural heritage of the city. Smoking, up until just a few decades ago, was the only way that villagers could preserve their precious pig that they slaughtered once a year, because refrigerators were so out of reach. And it's really smoky in here. Bit of sugar. Cheers. Cheers, 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 cheers. I'm not just here in this village to try my hand at farm work. In fact, I'm here to see how President Xi Jinping's signature concept, a community of shared future for mankind, is being put into action. Xi envisages a world which is clean, inclusive and free from fear and poverty. So, can China lead the way in terms of poverty alleviation? This is Xinhua Special, and I'm Helen Bentley. China defines people's economic status through 5 factors: food, clothing, housing, healthcare and education. If you lack any of these, or your annual income is below the national standard, you will be classified as poor.
2年多以来，我们已经帮助了69户的老百姓，解决了脱贫摘帽的问题。
If you are classified as poor, then you're included on the National Poverty Register, and you'll get help from a local official. And if you look at this here, this family of 3 is actually poor because of the father is disabled. And thanks to government assistance to help them raise pigs and chicken, also to cover healthcare because of the father, and to help them build a new home, the family increased their annual income in 2017 to over 7,000 kwai. 10 households in this village still live in poverty. Ms. Wen's family is one of them.
因为我丈夫不能挣钱，因为他得了个细肺病。 但是就是我有个娃儿，他是个残疾，就是个重症肌无力那种嘛，就是现在就没得药治，现在就坐轮椅那种。
And this family meets all the economic requirements bar one: housing. Their home has been deemed unsuitable for living in. Therefore, this year they'll be entitled to a government renovation grant for their home. These measures help individual families find a path out of poverty for now. But for a rural community to thrive and prosper, roads and schools are what make the real difference. The only way up and down these mountains used to be by rickety ladders and winding steep paths. And you really can't underestimate the difference that it's made since those paths were widened and connected to the main road down in the valley, even if it is still a bit of a bumpy ride. Alongside the main road, a new school has been built with modern facilities for all the students that used to attend schools that were scattered all along the mountains. Chung Sheng-fu is the only teacher for the 11 students here across 2 grades. He also doubles up as the school cook.
长饭村原来叫做渔人村，在当地政府和当地领导下，那个改变了这个当地的熟悉环境。长饭村这个渔人村的帽子，那个鱼字就甩掉了。
Tangfang is one of 92 poor villages in this township. In just 4 decades, 700 million Chinese were lifted out of poverty. That's the same number of people who remain in poverty worldwide today. The UN has called for an end to all forms of poverty by 2030, and China plans to achieve this goal 10 years ahead of time. Whether the China poverty alleviation model is suitable for other nations remains to be seen. But what it does offer is some clear success that brings hope and can embolden those fighting poverty in other parts of the world. The key concept in the President's vision is a real community, like the villagers here in Tangfang. When Xi talks about a shared future, he's talking about global solutions to global challenges like pollution or poverty. Whether we like it or not, the fate on this planet is a fate that is shared by all. It's only when we all push in the same direction that the common fate that awaits us can be truly called a community of shared future. See you next time.
Okay, we see that this is a video from Xinhua's special, Xinhua being the official news agency of China. Anyway, what the Chinese have been doing at the moment on poverty alleviation is targeted help. What does it mean? It means that identify the problems of a special household and then provide solution to that household in order to help them get out of poverty. So that is the basic idea. It sounds easy, but there are still 40 million people under poverty line. So it is a tremendous amount of work to draw these last 40 million people out of poverty. As seen here, sometimes it is about building a road in a very difficult situations among the mountains, winding down and forth. And sometimes it's about building a new school and providing a teacher. Now, in terms of education, the Chinese have always been quite keen to educate their young. There's a historic reason for that. The historic reason is that since the first emperor and then progressively improved, the government services have always been through a merit system. So it is about taking public examinations. If your examination is good, then you're offered a official positions in the government, and then you can get out from there. So for the poor, the surest way to get out of that situation is have your kid successful in education and successful in one of those public examinations. And hence, Chinese are very keen to provide whatever is necessary to help their child to learn. And that reflects in even very small village, very remote village, they still try to employ 1 or 2 teachers, even if there's a little number of children there waiting to be taught. So we see an example there where a teacher is responsible for 11 students spread across 2 grades. One teacher, 11 students, you will say, oh, there is a very comfortable teacher to student ratio. But just remember, this teacher do everything for the children, including their lunch. So there's a big requirement. Okay, lastly, I'm going to show you the final video, and then we'll discuss that after the video.
在那一瞬间，我的心好似刀在锐利 次一样，你们给我的那盏灯也就灭了。
Jo was one of China's 9 million left-behind children. Her parents, like millions across the country, worked far away from their hometowns for years. In 2013, Jo's family and others in Gansu began to be relocated from the parched, inhospitable mountains to new purpose-built towns with schools, hospitals and jobs. Earlier this year, Jo's parents told her that they didn't need to leave this time. This is Xinhua Special. I'm Helen Bentley. Over the past 30 years, China has lifted over 700 million people out of poverty. That's equal to half of the current Chinese population, or 10% of the world's population. From 2012 to 2016 alone, the number of people living in poverty was reduced by 14 million each year. Relocation is one way that China hopes to change the fortunes of its poor. For people who live in the remote but hospitable areas, the answer lies in roads, bridges and railways. The tiny mountainous village of Shachuang in Chongqing was isolated for hundreds of years until 1997, when villagers began to dig out a road by hand. It took 6 years and cost multiple lives. 2 years ago, under the government's poverty programme, the dirt track was transformed into a modern road, ensuring safe, free passage for people, products and capital. While tens of billions of yuan in central funding has helped to improve the lives of millions of people every year, in China's experience, poverty must be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. China's answer to this? Dispatching nearly 800,000 party officials to rural areas to design programmes for and with the local communities. In 2014, an official called Huang Chengchao travelled through 7 provinces with 1,600 sheep from his hometown in East China to Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. He chose this breed of sheep as they produce more lambs than the local variety. Less than a year later, Huang died of a heart attack. Half of his ashes were scattered in Xinjiang, while his legacy lives on through the sheep and their lambs that offer the locals a way out of poverty. China has entered the most difficult phase of poverty alleviation, as it committed to eliminating poverty by 2020. 3% of the population, or around 40 million people, still live below the national poverty line of 2,300 yuan in annual income. President Xi Jinping once said, "No single poor region or individual living in poverty should be left behind." He places poverty alleviation as a top priority of his state governance. The President has visited the 14 most impoverished areas across the country and called for precision measures in this final push. This means that poverty alleviation must focus on targeted people and industries and use the right tools to produce results. For China to improve the lives of the last 40 million by 2020, 1 million people must be lifted out of poverty every month. That's 20 people a minute. See you next time.
So we see that the Chinese government is actually targeting the poor in a very specific way. It depends on what is the factors that is limiting the family into a better life, and then tackle on that. For example, if the house is broken, windy, etc., they will repair the house. If there are people disabled, then they will give them some disabled support. I do hope that the Chinese government can achieve its goal of eliminating poverty by 2020. So there are 2 years to go, and obviously I will be reporting that by 2020. Hope to see you then. Bye bye.